those are my personal pronouns. I work at Comcast Cable where I build engineering teams, which is what we're going to talk about. So I have a good friend who may be the fairy godfather of this story. Hap works at an escape the room place, which are popping up all over the place. I'm sure many of you have been. And he was making fun of software engineers one day by saying, oh, you know, a big group came through, and his favorite groups of people to come through and try to escape his room are groups of software engineers, which tend to be all white males, right? And they tend to fail spectacularly to escape the room, and they tend to devolve very quickly into a blame game at the end of it. So I turned this around based on some reading that I've been doing, and I asked Hap, well, who are the people that come and always escape? And what he said to me matched what I had been doing in my own research. He said, actually, bachelorette parties. They always get out. They have a great time. And so, like I said, this matched some of the research I've been doing talking about the idea of collective intelligence, which is studied really heavily in the psychology industry, which shows us that what makes a team able to solve complex problems together well, very relevant to my industry, is not the intelligence of the members of the team, as many people might think, but actually what improves it is the empathy of the individual members of that team. And whether it's societal or biological, it's true that in this country, women tend to do better on empathy tests than men do. And so teams of all women actually tend to perform better at tasks and tests of complex problem solving. So it's really important that we improve the gender diversity in our industry. This research that I'm talking about was actually done at Harvard in 2010. And one of the similar finds in a follow-up study was that diverse teams actually generate better ideas scored by judges. And there are lots of counterexamples of this in our industry. So airbags are a really tragic example where the first airbags that were designed by all-male engineering teams killed women and children. More recently, we had the explosion of healthcare tracking apps, which allowed you to track how much chromium supplement you took daily. Does anyone take chromium supplement? I'm sure there are good health reasons to take that. But although it allowed for that, it failed to allow women to track their menstrual cycle. Half of our population is probably pretty interested in tracking that. So there's just ridiculous amounts of research on the productivity gains and the monetary gains of companies that diversify. But it's really important that when you're building a team, the broader the experiences of the members of your team, the better you're going to do at generating a diverse set of ideas and serving a diverse market. So thinking about this in terms of what I was personally working on, I realized that I needed to change the way I hired. One of the really fascinating things that I read at about the same time was a study by a website called interviewing.io, and it's a practice interview site that mimics pretty well what the tech interview process normally looks like. You do kind of fizz-buzz type exercises, you get scored, and what they published was that there's very little correlation between the score of an engineer trying an interview on the platform and their own future scores. So you would think if I go on this and I score a 2, because I'm probably going to score pretty low, I would always score a 2. But what they found was that actually, with the exception of some very high and very low scorers, it was kind of a crapshoot. You'd be better rolling a 4-sided dice than going through the interview process, which is really interesting. And we can only ever assert for false positives in interviewing, right? We can say, well, we hired this person and they were a terrible fit. We can't actually ever assert for false negatives. How many people did you turn down from coming in and working for your company that would have helped you solve problems better than the people that you hired? I don't know, right? You can't answer that question, and yet I know so many managers who will answer, our hiring process is great. Look at these wonderful people that we have. And yeah, they're wonderful, but you can't tell me you have a good interviewing process. So I just decided to throw out my whole playbook and start from scratch. So we're going to talk through that really fast. So the first thing I did is took a look at the facade that we were presenting to the world, right? How do we present ourselves publicly? What does my team look like? If I have someone who runs an alt-right website during their spare time, I'm not going to be able to hire a diverse team. I'm going to give up before I start. Checking out social media profiles, looking at conference talks that people have given, what topics, how did they present. Basically kind of doing opposition research like a politician would, right? Luckily, I work at Comcast. Our recruiting page does not primarily consist of white guys drinking beer, but it's amazing how many technology companies think that the way to recruit people into their company is to show pictures of white guys drinking beer. I've given this talk and done workshops on how to improve your hiring process at a variety of Comcast offices and outside companies. One of my favorite counterexamples was a company I went to that said, the number one thing we want candidates to think when they come in here is that this is a fun place to work. And their office was a tomb. It was perfectly quiet. People were in their cubicles working on their own. No one was collaborating. And keep in mind that people who are coming from underrepresented communities in tech, we've heard the stories out there. They all have horror stories, right? When they come into an interview, they're actually evaluating you at a very different level than a white guy does. They're looking for examples of dissonance. What are you telling me that doesn't match what I'm seeing here? And when they find that, they're going to make assumptions about what else you're not telling them, right? And so you want to avoid that dissonance whenever possible. We're terrible at writing job descriptions, and I'm guilty of this as everyone else is, right? We have one job description that we wrote forever ago, and we've dusted it off, and we've used it again and again. So we have things like requirements that say you need 5 years of Swift experience, which was a language created in 2014. That's a little difficult to achieve. This is good general hiring advice, but it's really specific to diversity as well. So HP has a very well-known study from 2008 that shows that men will generally apply for a position if they meet 60% of the requirements, but women will only apply for a position if they meet 100% of the requirements. So really good advice that one of my female friends has shared with me is like, women should apply like a mediocre white guy. And it's really good advice, but we should also write better job descriptions, right? So we eliminated the word requirements. If you can't look at the list of requirements on your job, if there's anything on that list that you can say, if someone met every one of these except this one, I wouldn't hire them, then that's a requirement. If they met everything else but not this one, would you hire them? You probably would. That's not a requirement. Thank you. So use phrases like bring 2 of 5 of these skills, or we actually eliminated in the end requirements altogether. We use preferred qualifications. We cut out the middleman. We owned the process from the front. I work for a giant company. There are like 3 different teams on recruiting that are involved in talking to candidates before I talk to them if I do it the normal way. I gave that up. I owned the process from the beginning. I was upfront about the negatives. We looked really closely at how we were evaluating people. Sit down and ask your employees, what are the characteristics that will make people successful on my team? When I asked my team that, their list in order was empathy, ability to learn, enthusiasm for the task, and finally technical skills. Almost every technology team interviews for technical skills alone and evaluates on technical skills alone. That was literally the last thing on the list when I compiled the list from my employees. We also looked at how we do it. We eliminated panels. We eliminated whiteboard coding exercises, which have 0 correlation to the way people actually do their job. We looked for ways to collect immediate feedback, numeric scores to make it as fair as possible. So did it work? Reasonably well, right? This is more gender binary than I would like. One thing that's kind of hard to capture in this graphic is that we did improve our ability diversity quite a bit as well. We actually have someone on the team who's paraplegic. So this was like pretty typical tech team, and that's where we were, and this is where we are today. And it's a very different scene, I can tell you. So I like books, so here's some of the resources that I used in putting this together. I have a lot more information that I'd be happy to talk about afterwards if you want to find me. So, thank you.